Good afternoon and welcome to our final session of the day. You're in the session Headteacher Recruitment with Eteach. My name is Lauren Naden and I am Senior Partnerships Manager at Governors for Schools. For those who are visually impaired, we will be sharing a brief audio description of ourselves. So I'm hosting today's session and I am female, white British in my early 30s with shoulder-length blonde hair. Before I introduce our speakers, just a few housekeeping notes. So closed captions are available and speakers have been invited to share a short verbal description of themselves, as I mentioned. The chat function is disabled, but if you would like to ask any questions, you can do so using the Q&A panel, and we will endeavour to get to as many of those as possible at the end of the session. This session is being recorded and links to the video will be sent out to everyone who registered for the event afterwards in the coming days. Please continue to follow the conference and like and share the content on social media using the GFS Conference 21 hashtag. We'll also be sharing a short survey with you at the end of the session, so please do complete that for us as well. Moving on to the next slide. We're very happy to be here today to share this session with you. Professional recruitment practices are essential in recruiting and selecting head teachers. And in this session, which has been organised by recruitment experts Eteach, we are joined by 3 speakers who are going to share their insights on this topic. So joining us today, we have Hannah Stolten. Hannah is CEO at Governors for Schools, and in addition to working in both the education and the recruitment sectors, Anna also has 7 years' experience as a school governor. Anna is currently chair of governors at a primary school in Essex. We're also joined by Eamon Whelan. Eamon is a founding partner and director of Yearwood Education, who provide independent education advice nationally. Eamon is co-director of the London office and senior advisor at the Association of Education Advisors, which provides accredited independent training for school advisors. And finally, we are also joined by Rhys Howells. So Rhys is Managing Director of the Eteach Group, and the Eteach Group are committed to driving transformation in education through disruption and innovation and by taking a blended approach to recruitment. So this is a popular session today, and I'm sure many of you will have questions, so please do use that Q&A function to make sure that we can answer your questions at the end of the session. I'm now going to hand over to Rhys, who's going to talk about the key partners involved in the process and the current challenges faced. Over to you, Rhys.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lauren. And just before I start, for those who are visually impaired, I am white British male with absolutely no hair at all. Hopefully that helps. So thank you for that. I think if we can move to the next slide, it's my absolute pleasure to be here today talking to you guys about recruitment, and as we all know, a very topical subject in education at the moment around the gaps between head teacher careers and whether we are able to source leaders like we have been able to in the past. And to start us off, we thought we'd introduce the topic of, in terms of who is there for you when it comes to recruiting head teachers or leaders for the school. And we like to break it down into a very simple sort of four-pillar process here. Your current head teacher being an obvious source of help and assistance during this process, as long as there is no sort of love lost between and the head teacher is leaving on good terms, etc. That is a fantastic resource, we believe, for schools to help not only plan for the future recruitment of the new head, but also to help assimilate and prepare governors and prepare the brief in terms of where the school's vision and direction are heading to. School governors are increasingly playing a far more important role in head teacher recruitment, we find. And actively involved with recruitment personnel, as well as writing the adverts, as well as designing the interview process, selection process, normally come with some fantastic experience from out of sector as well as in, and provide a experience level of recruitment support for schools. The advisory level out there is substantial now, and the ability for us to connect not just physically within a local community, but also on a national level, really brings this group of people into the process in a very useful way. And they're able to assist on not only the process, but also the vision and designing what the sort of person spec and who we're looking for in each individual school. Finally, the recruitment specialists involved. And this doesn't have to be a recruitment agent per se, someone that is on a retainer or working for a fee, but can also be a recruitment specialist internally at the school, someone from an HR, depending on the size of the school or group, whether there is an HR professional or a recruitment professional in there, helping to advise on the process, helping to advise on the needs of both the school as well as the candidates. So almost being a middleman there, ensuring that the ultimate objective is met by finding that perfect match from a strategic perspective for the school, between the school and the head teacher. Next slide, please. The current challenges, as we all know, we believe are facing is we're still seeing a shortage of not just leadership, but shortages throughout education. And obviously this is then compounding when it comes to leadership roles. We're still seeing a gap between the age levels of current heads that are planning on retirement and those that are then emerging through the ranks. This could lead to shortages for filling effective leadership positions in the current present situation. Safeguarding as well is ever present in our industry, and ensuring that we are as compliant as possible is always a challenge in that front. Leadership expectations, I believe, on both sides, what we're expecting this leader to bring in terms of the strategic vision and value for the school, but also on the side of the leader. There are many occasions that we've seen in our capacity as recruitment specialists where the vision and the expectations are not aligned, and that can only lead to friction within the process or within the new post as someone steps into it. Diversity, ensuring that we have a varied and different opportunities for different people and diverse opportunity backgrounds, individuals to come into schools and be eligible for any opportunity as well. And as well as the school variation, the different opportunities now available, as well as those that are making those opportunities available to different individuals that might be looking at either teaching in secondary schools, primary schools. Different size schools do offer different opportunities and challenges, which is something that should be considered when recruiting for new senior leaders. As that is a bit of an introduction and setting the scene to where we're going, I believe I'm now handing off to Hannah Stolton to talk about the role of the governors within head teacher recruitment. So over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Reese. To start with my description, that picture's a bit out of date of me. For those of you who can't see it, I have my post-COVID haircut, so now have short brown hair and glasses. I'm female, white British, and in my mid-40s. As Lauren said, I am CEO of Governors for Schools, but I'm also chair of governors at a primary school in Essex. We have around 280 pupils, and it's a maintained school. So we were responsible for the recruitment of a head teacher, which we had to do around 4 years ago. At that time, I'd very recently taken on the role of chair, so it was a huge learning curve for me. So first slide, please, if you can move on. So the first thing I would say is don't panic. I'm not going to lie, it is a huge responsibility. Recruiting someone to lead the school, no doubt it will weigh heavily on your shoulders. However, you do have a board of people around you and lots of access to advice, so don't be afraid. I think your first thoughts are going to depend on whether it is expected, whether it's a surprise. perhaps your head teacher is retiring and you knew it was coming, but maybe you weren't aware that they were looking for a new role, or as we said, maybe leaving the profession. Whatever the reason, hopefully you've been having regular conversations with your head teacher about their professional development and it's not too much of a shock. I would say if it is a surprise at this point, it's probably a good idea to find out if there's any underlying issues you should have been aware of, because you want to have those open conversations with your current head teacher to better prepare for your recruitment process and the induction of the new member of staff. If you're in a maintained school, you must inform your local authority, which is what we did straight away. And if you're in a multi-academy trust, you'll need to get onto your HR team, check that they know all about it, and then they will have their policies to follow, and they may inform the local authority too. In discussing this with colleagues at Governors for Schools, one who has recruited a new head teacher recently was advised to explore other options before proceeding to recruitment. So looking at whether the school could join a federation or a partnership with other schools. I would say certainly don't rush into things. You want to give yourself time to think things through. It is a big decision. So next slide, please. So the first steps you need to take, you want to sit down and discuss the situation with your head teacher and make a plan. Think about what your timescales are, who you're going to need to inform, when you're going to do that and how you're going to do it. First off, you'll need to draft a letter for the parents so that you can inform people, and you really want to do that before the secret gets out in another way. First of all, you need to inform the other governors. So what would normally happen is or what would hopefully happen is the head teacher would speak to the chair of governors, let them know that they are intending to leave, and you would then hold an extraordinary meeting, unless you've got a full governing board meeting planned, and make sure everyone is informed at the same time. At this point, you can share the timeline of when you plan to inform the wider community and share the letter that you've prepared for parents, because you'll need to have that approved by the governors. What we did as well is we set up at that point a focus group who would take the lead on the recruitment process. We decided a board of 12 is just too much for all of us to be involved. So we set up a group of, I think it was 5 or 6 people who would take the lead on the recruitment process. We arranged times with them to draft and confirm the job description, approve the advertisement and a timeline for the interviews. Next slide, please. So once you've had the conversation with the governors, your next step is to inform everyone else in the school community. First things first, obviously, it will need to be the staff. I would say when you're informing staff, make sure you're telling everybody, not just the teachers. Everyone in the school needs to know at the same time. You may have your head teacher may want to break the news themselves, but I think it's really important for you to be there as a governor to reassure them that you'll be looking for the best possible candidate as a replacement, and to sort of stress that you're looking for continuity and stability as far as it's possible. Obviously, it's going to be a time of change for them, and that really affects people in many different ways. So it's just sort of trying to reassure the staff as much as you possibly can. You'll then need to inform parents. So you'll have already drafted the letter that you'll be sending out from the entire governing board. And again, reassurance is key, I would say, making sure that they know what the situation is, what the process will be, sort of just at a top level. What we did was, I think we sent out an email on the same day as that we told pupils, so that everybody knew in very swift succession. So we were fortunate, it was pre-COVID, so we had all of the pupils together in an assembly, and the head teacher broke the news to them, and we could sort of talk to them about what would happen next. Obviously in these times that may not be so simple, you may need a series of assemblies, however you're going to manage it, but I do think it's probably best for the pupils to hear it from the head teacher, and be able to have questions that they might have answered about what's going to happen next. Next slide, please. So once you've informed the community, you can start thinking about how you're going to advertise the role. I would say have a think about where you want to share the information and share details of the vacancy. You might want to use job boards like Eteach, or you may want to use traditional media, for example, TES or The Guardian. Alternatively, you might go to a specialist recruiter to headhunt somebody, or you may share the vacancy on your local authority jobs listings page, which is what we did. What we did is we had a look at the advertisements for other head teachers. We wanted to have a think about what we should include in the content, and also we wanted to include what made our school unique. We really wanted to sell it to prospective candidates so that we would get the best group we could possibly get. We shared details of our vision as a governing board and the ethos of the school in that, so that applicants could really picture themselves in the role. We also included pictures of the school, and we really encouraged prospective candidates to come and have a look around the school so that they could get a feel for what we were like. Before advertising, we drafted a job description and a person specification. That was really key. That enabled us really to have something that we could shortlist against. Our aim there was really to help stop unconscious bias creeping in, something to think about, definitely. As we said, we want to increase diversity, so something to think about. We also use an application form for our applicants, and it was great because actually what we could do was we could remove the front page, which had their name, their age and other details on it, and so that would hopefully prevent bias that might creep in. Finally, on this topic, you need to discuss what budget you have available for advertising. Obviously, there's not an unlimited pool of budget in any school, and it might not be something that you had prepared for. So have a look at the costs associated when making the decision as to where to share the vacancy, I would say. Next slide, please. So once you've advertised the role, you'll be hoping for a flood of lovely applicants to come in, lots of lovely applications. To give you an idea, for our vacancy, we received 8 applications and we took 5 forward to interview. So we shortlisted 5 of them. To review the applications, we had our focus group already set up. We had in that group a governor with an HR background, which was really useful. So if you've got somebody in your governing board with either recruitment or HR experience, definitely make sure that they're on that group. And we also invited the school improvement partner to join us. His role wasn't really to make judgment, he just listened in and was just somebody that we could ask questions about, any specific terminology or qualifications, things like that we weren't quite sure of. So it was just useful to have, you know, another pair of ears there just to provide some additional guidance. Once we'd shortlisted, we set up our interview days. We ran the interviews over 2 days. It really is a whole other experience if it's not something you're used to. A full-on event, and you will be exhausted at the end of it. We decided on our interview panel, it couldn't be the full 5-6 people, so we had 3 governors, and again the school improvement partner sat in on it. Again, not there to make a decision on who to appoint, but just to sort of facilitate our conversations. The interview days were a real event. We wanted to see the applicants in as many different contexts as possible. So think about what's relevant for your school. For us, we asked that they do an assembly. So they had an assembly with all of the children back in those days. We asked them to do an in-tray exercise. They had to reply to a parental concern letter, something pretty standard, but something hopefully that would show their prowess in that area. We had asked them to do a presentation. They didn't have the details of that prior to the session. It was, you know, we gave it to them and then gave them some preparation time. And we had a list of standard interview questions that we had devised before the session. To get those questions, we got help from the school improvement partner, and also we used the Key for School Governors quite extensively. So they were 2 useful sources of advice. During the day, we thought about who we wanted to be involved. So obviously the governors were involved, but we also wanted them to have the opportunity to meet with staff. So we had a lunch where everyone could meet and chat. And we also, as well as having the assembly, we asked the school council to speak to them, which was really lovely, actually. Something I'd definitely recommend. See them interacting with the pupils was a real plus, I think. We set a scoring system before the interviews so that we're all on the same page on that front. So when we started to sort of review the applicants at the end of the 2 days, we had those scores to look back on. And as I said, we had 5 applicants go forward, and we actually rejected 2 of them at the end of day 1, because we just knew at that point that they weren't right for the school, and we just didn't want to waste their time by inviting them back for a second day. Next slide, please. So following the interviews, we got together as a panel and discussed how the applicants performed. I think ideally you'd want to make a decision on that day. You want to get it done and make sure that it's all fresh in your mind, I think. Happily for us, after quite a lengthy conversation, we came to the same conclusion, and we all knew which candidate was the right one for us. If that hadn't been the case, we had discussed that the chair could have the deciding vote, but I think we were also very clear as the governing board that if we weren't happy with the choice, or if there wasn't a candidate that met our criteria, we'd want to go back out to advertisement. We wouldn't want to just, you know, make do, as it were. It's such an important role. We obviously don't want the wrong person. Before going on to let the candidates know, we made sure that we had some really constructive feedback for each of them. It's important because no doubt, you know, they'll be going for other interviews, and they have given up a lot of their time after all to attend and to prepare for the interview. So I think it's only courteous that you really give them some of that feedback that you have. I first called, so as chair, it was my responsibility to first call the successful applicant, made sure I had all of the salary details to hand, the start date, you know, we knew a rough start date, but just to sort of confirm that we wanted them to start the following term. We had a rough idea of the handover plan. Obviously it wasn't set in stone or anything like that, but we wanted to ensure a smooth transition, and we wanted to really give a good impression to our new member of staff that they would be supported by the governing board. So hopefully for you, like me, they accepted, they will accept, and you'll have your new recruit ready to go. Once you've confirmed their appointment, you then have the not so nice task of going back to the unsuccessful candidates. That's where the feedback really comes in. I think you wanted to show your appreciation of the time that they've given, and I think what was key for us is we wanted them to leave with a really positive impression of the school, despite not being successful. So finally, you need to think about telling the school community. So you've got your person who's accepted, inform the school staff first, and then let the parents and students know. You need, I would say, to give your new member of staff, your new head teacher, the best start possible. So make sure you can share details about why they're such an excellent choice and the skills and experience they'll bring to lead your school over the coming years. So that was our process for recruiting a new head teacher. I would say planning is all. We really wanted to be prepared for the whole process. It was an exhausting scenario at the end of those 2 days. However, hopefully you'll be as happy as we are with our appointed head teacher. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Hannah. And I'm just going to hand over to Eamon now to share a little bit about using an advisor in the process.
Did the mute trick. Good afternoon, everyone. Eamon Whelan, delighted to be with you. I am a mature white male of Irish origin with hair, but is greying in certain parts. Lovely to speak to you all. I'm going to try and keep mine fairly brief. I've got about 5 or 6 minutes. I've got about 6 slides. And it's absolutely not going to be a sales pitch for advisors, so don't worry about that. As mentioned earlier, I work for the Association of Education Advisors, which is a new group which is independent, which trains advisors for schools. And if you're interested in that, I can give you more information later. But it's an organisation that I was one of the guinea pigs when they started 3 years ago, and there's now 250 of us. And I was very impressed with the quality of the advisory training. My background was in schools, and where I was a senior leader and a governor. And I thought that those skills would be perfect for me to be an advisor for advising schools. And in fact, it's a very different skill set. So I just leave that initial thought with you. Okay, next slide, please. this slide here, I'll give you 30 seconds to scan through it first, and then I'll just raise a few points. If I may, could I draw your attention to the 4th bullet point, and where it says a lack of independence might create, might impact on the objectivity and ability to oversee the trust, but you don't have to be in a trust. So have we got a problem in schools as governors when we have maybe a very charismatic or head or a set of governors who see the school in a particular way? Is it important for us as governors to look outside and get best advice? We do that if we were buying a car. We do it if it was child protection. We do it if it was auditing our finances. So I just raised that thought for you about just making sure there's a separation of roles, and that in this wonderful opportunity to move the institution or the mat on, we've got the very best of advice. Next slide, please. I'll let you read this again for scan through it for 15 seconds or so. Clearly, for our discussion today, the final bullet point is very relevant. I would say that our role as governors and advisors is to make sure that the succession plan works, and the succession plan fits where the school is or where the school wants to go in the future. Don't underestimate the importance of the governing body in that. An over-reliance on a head, an outgoing head, is not necessarily the best practice. Getting a head to appoint their own successor or to have a significant role in that can be very useful for us as governors, but at the same time, it can lead to all sorts of problems. So succession planning is, I would say, one of the most important roles of the governing body, and planning for the future, and clearly getting their head right is critical. Next slide, please. So you'll all know and love the Nolan Principles, but going back to the previous point I made, one of the Nolan Principles is objectivity. Another is accountability, and the other one is openness. So how are you going to be truly objective? How are you, in terms of your accountability to the students and the parents, how does that work when you are maybe a parent governor, or you love the institution and you may have a very high regard or not for the outgoing head? So the Nolan Principles, the 7 pillars, I think, are something to fall back on. In terms of attracting, recruiting, and retaining, I think the recruitment and the retention of head teachers, I think there's a key role for an independent advisor there. And we're not talking about retaining the head, but I would humbly suggest that you think about that. How are you going to look after this new head and make sure they are happy? You're going to make sure that they're supported. Headship is a very lonely job. They have to make tough decisions. And of course, I would say that they need individual coaching, support, guidance, which you as the chair of governors and the governing body will give them. But I'd ask yourself the question, are you qualified to do that? And do they need their own time and space? Which leads nicely to the third part, is using all the resources that are available to you. And clearly I'm talking about independent advice, but look around, and Ellen's already mentioned the use of people with particular skill sets. In terms of the new pair of eyes, I would strongly suggest you should do that for a head teacher appointment. A school improvement partner, fine. Local authority advisors, fine. You've got this one-off opportunity. Do you need a completely fresh, independent, dispassionate set of eyes looking at your processes, helping you with the process? I'll let you reflect on that. And of course, that advice that you get, if you are going down any form of advisory route, there are advisors and advisors. I would want the advisor to be truly independent, like you get an independent, we get an independent audit. How do you know they're independent? How do you know their qualifications? A lot of advisors are former heads or former governors, but what's their qualification to advise you? What's the quality standard that you can be assured of? If you're getting a plumber into your house, how do you know that plumber's any good apart from word of mouth? And that's why organizations like Checker Trader and all those sorts of things are very successful. So clearly, I would say that a body like the Association of Education Advisors or the National Governance Association or ASCL are very good bodies in which you should be able to get the quality of independent advice that you want. And of course, lastly, you know, we need to get it right. The consequences can be catastrophic, not just for the reputational damage to the governing body, the head, but the damage to generations of students. So this is where, again, where I would always seek advice. The next two slides are, before we click into them, are just descriptors of what a good advisor would do. They're a bit wordy, but if we can flick onto the first one, I'll pick out some highlights. If you look at the subheadings, if you get a good advisor, they'll enable you. They will have very clear agreed protocols, and they will have great personal attributes and skills. You see the word in the second blob, resolving professional issues independently. Can you trust your advisor to tell you what other people are too scared to tell you because of your position of power and influence? Will they speak truth to power? Next slide, please. And credibility and knowledge. We mentioned earlier about knowledge within the governing body. What are the gaps in your governing body? Where are the gaps with your local authority or your MAT or whatever you are? How do you, as the chair of governors, fill those gaps in knowledge? And of the third blob I would focus in on, are you as a governor, are we up to speed on current and emerging policy and strategy? You know, what is the agenda? What's the zeitgeist? What's going on? What do parents and students want? What's different in the education world? And I think independent advice would be very useful in that regard. I believe that might be the end of the slides if I've counted properly. Thank you very much for listening. If you do want access to independent advice, feel free to contact me or any of the bodies which I have said, but I would recommend for this particular activity, you should consider it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Eamon. And just to reiterate for everyone that we will be circulating this recording as well as some additional links to additional resources after the session. So everything that Eamon mentioned there should be accessible to you in the next day or so. I'm now going to hand over to Reese, but just before I do, just a reminder to pop any questions into the Q&A. We've had some come through and it'd be great to see some more as well. So over to you, Reese.
Thank you, Lauren. It's on mute again. And can I just apologize if anyone could see my video? I had an attack of a pop-up that I couldn't get rid of, and I was frantically trying to get rid of it so it didn't affect the screen. But if you did see my fingers across the front of the thing, apologies for that. It falls to me to discuss the role of the recruiter for hiring a head teacher. And the way I'll be coming at this is not simply as the recruiter, but the recruiter in this standpoint is whether you use a job board and you're choosing the advertising route, or whether you are using a specialist recruiter executive search provider. The reason for this is at Eteach, we do have quite a unique position whereby we work with schools at both levels, sometimes combined together. Some schools are looking to do this in a cost-effective manner via advertising alone, and we advise on strategies around that so that it gives the adverts the best chance of success. We work with a lot of schools on specialist recruitment assignments from a very much a person perspective, as well as a lot of schools where we combine it all together to enable them to almost broaden the reach and maximize the reach of their assignment success. So could we go to the next slide, please? What to expect from your recruitment partner. So as I mentioned, when it is a true recruitment partner, and any recruitment partner worth their salt should be doing a lot more than just sending you CVs when it comes down to a leadership assignment, and as well as most other recruitment assignments as well. But from this, before CVs even come across your door, etc., there should be a workshop on exactly what the recruitment specialist will be doing, whether that is designing adverts, choosing forums or methods or broadcasting channels in order to make sure the adverts are seen by the right people, helping to design the process. So from a sort of infrastructure perspective, your recruitment partner should really advise on all of that, not just start sending relevant CVs across. The part of that I think is most important is actually getting to know the school. Choosing a recruitment partner that has never even been to visit is a potential tricky one, but obviously time sensitive assignments might negate that. But the recruiter or specialist involved should be learning everything about your school, from the people into it to the strategic vision, the governing board, etc. It is imperative in order for them to actually match appropriately or help design marketing materials or collateral that will go out via advertising in a way that's then going to attract and engage the right individual. They need to learn more than just what the role is and where the school is. The recruiter then, obviously with all of this in mind, should go out to get to know the candidates. And if a service providing a shortlisting service or a full search, they will get to know and ensure the candidate from their side is the right fit, ensuring that it is the right opportunity for them, the salary expectations, all of the bits that can sometimes provide a bit of a stumbling block towards in the process, making sure that those are all eliminated and ensuring that everything is ready for the interview day or start of the process. The part of this that we believe is important as well is absolutely being honest with the candidate about what the challenges are. It is sometimes difficult conversations to have, but sugarcoating opportunities or not exactly giving the exact details of what's happening where at the school, even if they're not even issues, just it leads to further issues further down the line. And also a lot of candidates are looking for challenges occasionally that you might in the school or individuals in the school might think that's a put off, but it actually might be an attractive element for certain candidates, those who are looking to make their mark or make a change and really impact school in a positive way. Supporting the board from a recruitment partner, it should be involved at all levels. So not just working with the HR team in school, but absolutely working with the governors, understanding their needs as well and their personal sort of vision for the school and their involvement, but also helping the governing board differentiate themselves in terms of as a school and as a brand. A lot of recruitment does come down to almost marketing in the way that your brand, your employer brand, is what is really going to sell yourself apart and set yourself apart from the other schools in the area. again, it's going back to, it's not just a role in an area. We want it to be the right fit, the right cultural fit, personality fit, etc. And what does your school offer that can be a bit different from some of the other competing schools? And again, I've sort of covered the next part there. But so could we go on to the next slide, please? So in doing so, and some of the sort of combined services we've done in the past is help design and write person specifications, job descriptions on top of that, but also design the career pages or the career site, specifically a section on leadership or the leadership role and what that individual needs to know. Utilizing technology now is seriously effective and can have some amazing applications for leadership recruitment, specifically you know, online sort of videos or webinars of the school or individuals at the school, really detailing life, what life is like at the school, etc. But I mean, what we've noticed in terms of the application pack, it is an interesting one, because sometimes, depending on the size of the opportunity, the size of the school, or the individual we're trying to attract, application forms, long application processes and forms can be difficult for heads that are super busy in their current role. And as we all know, it is not a straightforward job. So therefore, thinking about methods of allowing head teacher or prospective heads to apply or give yourself a bit of an expression of interest into the role before then following up with a full application might open the door to some more options, instead of upfront, you know, a 25-page application form, which, you know, with the best will in the world, occasionally that can be, we can just run out of time and not have time to get around it. So while I'm not endorsing avoid the application process, there are different ways of gathering that information which could suit the busy lifestyles of head teachers on that front. But where we're advertising, most recruiters will have an advertising channel they go to, whether they charge that back to the client, etc. With Eteach, the benefit we normally do is it's all combined, so that the advertising is part of the final price and we don't actually charge a retainer, to make sure that it's a risk-free process for the schools. But the advertising campaign should not just be on job boards. We look to try and have an integrated approach, reaching out across social media. It's more and more becoming a channel that many people in different roles are becoming very accustomed to finding opportunities, job opportunities, employment opportunities through social media now. But also, what other methods of marketing are available? Targeted emails, banner adverts, etc., through either the job boards or other different promotional channels there. Then the individuals that are then part of this recruitment team, or the specialist recruitment team, you need to understand what they can bring to the process. You know, that it's not going to be a junior or someone very new to the sector that might not understand the nuances of head teacher recruitment. So absolutely, really understanding who it is at the other end of the phone or part of the recruitment team, it would be a really important part of the recruitment process that they could offer. And as I mentioned, a lot of recruiters do offer retained. Retained is typically quite common within the head teacher process, but now and more so than ever, there are more contingent sources of recruitment, where, because the ability to use technology and to increase the chances without having to lay down a massive amount of overheads up front, mean that a lot of recruiters can do this on a contingent basis without taking money up front. So establishing which one will be right for you, and based on, Hannah mentioned, you know, think about the budget carefully before we get into the process, because costs can get out of hand if we haven't taken that into consideration. Next slide, please. So to secure the right candidate, as I mentioned, use your recruiter, and in this context, recruiter being either the job board channel, the recruitment specialist, or a combination of both, to headhunt in the passive market. So one of the positives for actually using a combination of is that there exists a passive and an active job seeker market. the active job seeker market is typically around 25 to 30% of the overall market, and the passive being that 70 to 80%. What it means is that the passive market is open to new opportunities, but will need a bit of a push in order to apply for them, move towards them. So therefore, if we're just leaving the adverts on their own, that is only really hitting that active job seeker market, which is, as we know, a smaller percentage. So you're increasing your chances if you have someone that can proactively get themselves out into the market and source and approach candidates that are either in post currently or at least open to those sort of opportunities if they're in between. The values, the mission, the vision, you know, when it comes to talking to the candidates in that process, and when we get the opportunity to sell our opportunity, it should be about the why, not the what. As if those of you who have heard of Simon Sinek, focus on the why, start with why, about what is our mission as a school, what is our vision, our purpose, as that is what is really going to engage and strike a chord with potential candidates, not so much the fact that it's just a head teacher role in a certain area. And especially salary isn't as important as the values, the mission, the vision, a lot of the time. Have a definite list of strengths and improvements in current headship and role. I think it's important to, again, be open and honest around where the school is currently at, as well as the structures that exist around the head teacher, to know that the sort of prospective / new individual is coming into an environment where they have support, they have a network of advisors, if possible, or support system throughout the school and at governor level as well. When assessing the candidates, we do recommend using some form of scoring matrix, which will allow you to have consistency across your candidates, so that we are objectively measuring whether they are suitable for the opportunity at hand. And it's not sort of subjectively one person's favorite is another person's least favorite, etc. And that then causes some fraction within the hiring team. The driver, and it's what we're missing, I think it's really key to understand what that is in the current role, and whether it is just a straight replacement for an existing head that's moving on, or whether there's actually something that we feel needs to be an added value or added element in the leadership structure of the school. It's really good to identify that and have that discussion within the panel, within the interview period, to really assess that this individual can meet that missing element. And obviously your current senior leadership team, they need to complement and work with that. So looking at the roles and individuals that we already have in place, does this person complement, or will it clash with the current SLT? All things to consider when trying to secure the right candidate there. Next slide, please. Recruitment advice for governors. In terms of the governing board, it is a huge benefit and massive sort of advantage when coming to selecting a leadership role. We surveyed leaders at Eteach in the past, and one of the key decision-making factors was the strength of the governing board in a lot of cases. So it allowed them to know that they had this strong infrastructure behind them to help make advice, but also access to information around certain things that might not be the head teacher's forte in different elements like that. So how we will support them as a governing board, how we will support the head teacher as the governing board, how dynamic and how varied, I think. So what different strengths and opportunities do you bring them as a board? Being realistic about the challenges, I think, is really key, and being aligned on those challenges at the same time, all moving in the same direction rather than not clear about where we're going from a governing board to a leadership team. Any initiatives that we have put in to improve or make changes in the school workplace. And essentially what we're looking at here is showing that there is that core support network for a new head teacher to rely on and use in a strategic manner to benefit the school. Next slide, please. That might be the last one. There we go. So this is the final one, I think. One of the things we've experienced, and we advise a lot of our schools in doing, is that visit, whether it's the formal visit for the formal interview or pre-interview, to ensure that the candidates can visit the school and actually get a feel for the environment that they are potentially being interviewed for. We do like to recommend that a member of the board is present, who can provide context and information around the school from a governing board level. But also, one of the small tactical elements we do think is really important is that when a prospective head teacher does come to visit, the staff are fully informed of that, and not to be on absolute best behavior, it's nothing to do with that, but the positive environment we can sort of portray about the school. And if we are really out there looking for a candidate to join us, we need them to have everything, every point of contact throughout the school and throughout the visit as a positive experience. But also, use this opportunity to find out, about the candidate, and it might be in a more relaxed environment rather than an interview process as we're walking around school. It's a really good way to really find out the personality of the individual there. I think next slide, please.
Fantastic. I think that's over to me, Reese. Thank you so much, Reese. Apologies for talking over you. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise there. It's been really fantastic to hear from those with a kind of a variety of experience with this topic. We have a number of questions that I want to get to in a moment, but just before we do, I'd like to kind of hear from each of you briefly on what do governors need to think about once a head teacher is in post. So could each of you share your thoughts briefly on what you think it is important to consider after the recruitment process has been completed, and do jump in whenever you like, speakers, please.
Shall I go first? Yeah, well, I think two of the things that we really thought about was, firstly, making sure that the head teacher, the new head teacher, met with all of the governing board so that she could really get to know us as individuals as well as a whole team. And we sort of wanted to make sure that she was aware that we were there as support, but also challenge. And having come from a different school where there hadn't been that challenge, it was really interesting to hear that she actually did value the questions that we were asking, that we were really looking forward and talking to her about the vision and the strategy that we wanted for the school. So I think having those early conversations, maybe even before they are actually in role, really helps them to have that time, as started after Christmas. So she didn't have much of a break before joining us, but it was good to have those conversations before she started so she could have that thinking time, I think.
Fantastic, thank you, Hannah. And Eamon and Reese, do you have anything to add there?
I would say after that initial period of settling in, independent support and care from someone who gives them unconditional positive regard, who is not in the institution and is probably not a partner or a member of the family. Some kind of therapeutic coaching, mentoring support, where they can go to open up, to run difficult decisions past them, and to alleviate what I call the loneliness of leadership. And if you do that as a governing body, I think you'll have a much better chance of retaining your head. And I would also recommend that for staff as well. So the well-being agenda is what we're picking up in schools, particularly after COVID. Over accountability, look after them, giving them independent help.
Fantastic, thank you, Eamon. Yeah, that's a very good point. And we have been running a number of sessions about kind of staff well-being, head teacher well-being. It's definitely a really important important topic and an important consideration. And Reese, how about you?
I think both Hannah and Eamon have made amazing points there, and I can only echo that. Yeah, as Eamon said, the loneliness of the role, quickly establishing support and the ability for a head teacher to lean on and have that support network from the governing board that allows them to turn it into a less lonely place, but also know that they're not alone in making the decisions. It's not now over to them. You know, the full job is now on your shoulders, etc. So absolutely, I think it's a combination of the both to enable the vehicle for that support network.
Fantastic, thank you, Reese. We've had a number of questions come in from the Q&A panel, so I'd like to kind of field those to you now. So just to start off, one of our members of the audience today, their head teacher has retired and their deputy is currently acting head. The deputy is therefore kind of in the running. So to what extent should they be involved in the kind of recruitment process, given that they obviously kind of have some stakes in this role as well themselves?
May I say something? Well, the first principle I would suggest is any internal candidate should not get particular special advantage, but more importantly, special disadvantage. So if you start from that principle, how would your processes or structures advantage or disadvantage them or other candidates? And if you start from there, I think the answer will be pretty self-explanatory.
Fantastic, thank you. Hannah, did you want? Oh, Reese. Sorry,
I was just going to say I agree with Eamon, and it's quite commonplace that obviously your head is often in a good position to succeed an incumbent head. And for me, I would agree with Eamon in terms of we do not want to give special advantage, etc. However, when planning for, you know, who or what that future head is, you know, the deputy in position could provide just some good insight, because it might be those individuals, might not, but about what strategic values, what personalities, what etc. might need to fit into the senior leadership team, either above or with that individual. So I would caution having them too involved in the process, but certainly use them for some feedback on thoughts and stuff around the role, definitely.
Thank you, Reese.
Nothing more to add, really. I completely agree. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's great to hear that you're all in agreement there as well. We've spoken a little bit about kind of succession planning, and just kind of wanted to put it to you, kind of what does good succession planning look like? And again, I'm going to open it up to any of you that wants to jump in on that question.
Shall I go? Oh, go on, Eamon. Go on.
Go on, Helen.
Okay,
I went last time. It's your turn. Go on.
I think what one of the things that I've heard from others is that quite often the head teacher is a lonely role, and they can't necessarily share all of the information about the role with their deputy. So it's a tricky balance, I think, with succession planning. You want to be encouraging deputies to take that step up into a headship role, but it is that sort of, how do you support, especially if they've been in a small school where potentially a deputy head is teaching 100% of the time. Actually, how do they get that experience of what the head teacher does day to day? So I think there is a real key consideration in that aspect when talking to your head teacher as a governing board about how they're developing their staff, and not just not class teachers necessarily, but actually their deputy or their senior leadership team to take that step and take it forward. So I think it's got to be part of your ongoing discussions around professional development, is what I would say.
Fantastic, Anna. And Eamon, did you have anything to add there?
Well, just on the succession issue, I think the pitfall to avoid is for the governing body or board or trust board or whatever to leave that completely and exclusively to the head and the senior leadership team. Schools fail when the governance doesn't work. Okay, so the governors need to be involved in the setting of the vision, of the strategy that supports that, and the values of the institution. And they should be a common thread that goes all the way through that institution, which will evolve over time. And as your head comes and goes, the values of that particular organization remain the same. They could be religious in nature, they could be, the particular type of school, but the governing body must set that agenda. Now, once you've got those values and those principles about what sort of institution we are and what we want to be, then in terms of succession, you can look in two domains, internal and external. Have we got someone within the organization who really gets it, who can go the way we want it to go? Hopefully you have. If you haven't, do we have to look outside? Or do we do a combination of both? But always start with your values. And the only problem with values, as a wise person once said to me, is that you've got to stick by them sometimes. But that's the basis of everything.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eamon. And we have come to 5 o'clock, so I will need to wrap up the session now. We managed to get to the majority of the questions, and for those that I haven't been able to get to, I'll circulate with the panelists and hopefully try to get back to you in the next couple of days. Thank you so much to our speakers and to everybody in the audience who's joined us today. I'd just like to remind you that our conference is running all week. So we've got 2 more days left. And if you enjoyed this session, then you might be interested in several of the other sessions taking place. We'd be particularly delighted if you could join us for the launch of our new campaign, which is taking place on Friday at 4 p.m. The campaign is All Pupils, Every Ambition. And you can still sign up for that and all of the other sessions for free on our website. But I will leave the session there. Thank you again, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.